In the studio, what happens is that we can have that conversation very quickly.
Right.
We can make a change together. You can say, oh, okay, do you like this? They say yes, and then you lay it down. When you're doing stuff remote, it can get a little challenging, and sometimes get a little challenging with not only the communication, but the amount of time that it's taking you versus what you agreed to be paid for it.
Right.
How do you manage that sort of communication?
I err on the side of accommodation. And by and large, the better you get at listening to what they say they want, or the less you have to do that. But I just do it. So if they, I just listen to what they say, and most people will give a specific thing. Like if you get close, but you don't hit it on the head, they will many times say, hey, can we get another option after the first chorus? Can we have you stay out of the way of the vocal more, or, play a little bit more right here? You're gathering information every time you interact with folks like this. I've really only had to be a problem a couple times, and I still err on the side of accommodation. I wouldn't want them to pass my name on in a negative way. Like, this guy wouldn't make it right, or this,
Right. When it does happen, you don't change your approach. You still are accommodating. You still do it that way. Because you could argue that, well, hey, this is the fourth time I've had to go back and adjust this, and, blah, blah, blah. But the amount of time that takes, and the impact that would have on their perception of you and what they might say to someone else who doesn't have all of that information that's included in that situation, is much more negative than it would be to just finish the job with accommodation and then just maybe be busy next time.
Yeah, that's true. And that happens. Right. There are times when I've had people that are difficult enough to work with that you just sort of don't do it again. And for me, it's not even about having to do it again that would make me not want to work with them. It's more the treatment or the correspondence, or
that's what I mean.
Like if you're not being valued as a creator or a person, but to be honest, like most of these things kind of weed themselves out, because if you can't get it right in two different times of tweaking and replaying, they're probably going to move on. You know what I mean? Like the chance of it getting to 3 or 4 revisions, in my experience, is almost never. Because if you're that far off the mark, you're probably not the right guy.
It can also be in the context of where you're a little bit earlier on in your career, and the projects that you're getting are not necessarily from the people that know how to explain what they want, know how to communicate. So for the folks that are listening that may be just getting into it, we want to give them some insight on what questions do you ask? How do you navigate those situations where you're not working with a seasoned, professional that's going to be able to articulate all that stuff.
And that is absolutely true. And I think it's easy for some of us that may be fortunate enough to have already survived that gauntlet, that we're pretty fortunate that most of the people that we're working with pretty well know what they want, and then in the beginning, it's funny. It's like in most creative jobs, it's like the lower paying gigs are the hardest people to please. Again, I would take as many of these scenarios as a learning opportunity as much as you can.
Right.
Every time you get a chance to record is a chance for you to get better at what you're doing. Anytime you maybe are butting up against your ego, not wanting to be wrong, understand that you might need to reorient yourself into a position of gratitude that you have a scenario where you get to learn how to be a little bit better at playing with the record light on again. And the more you can do that, those troublesome scenarios where somebody's asking you to revise it 4 times, they do start to go away. I don't even know how it happens, but it does. Either you get better at pleasing, giving people what they want, or the caliber of collaborators that you have goes up, or both of those things happen.
Yeah, I think both of them happen simultaneously because of that.
Yeah.
Because you're figuring it out, so then you're making it easier, and then because you've proceeded through that whole situation with a positive attitude and an accommodating principle, then they're going to tell their friends, and then eventually you run into the right creative collaborators, and then over time that value rises, and then you're in that sort of position.
And that's one of the kind of like shitty parts of paying your dues in the beginning is there is going to be scenarios where you maybe feel like you're being taken advantage of, and maybe you are, And you just have to understand that this is just a phase. This is a season where you might have to work a little bit harder at pleasing somebody musically than you thought you would.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe it doesn't feel so good. You might not even see yourself getting better at it, but the more you do it, you will get better at it.
I love the example of looking at things as a learning opportunity.
Yeah.
I found that value pretty early on when the sessions that I was doing, at first were not that excited. I had one where some lady brought her dogs into a studio and tried to get them to sing with her. And that might have been the moment where I started to have this understanding that every opportunity is one, you should be grateful for it because you have an opportunity to do what you love doing.
Great.
And someone's paying you something for it.
Yeah.
But secondly, that this is a learning opportunity. And in some way, my future self is becoming more experienced.
Yes.
And I'm going to be better prepared for that situation that I want to be in the future because I made it through this situation.
Yeah. For sure.
Being upset about it and frustrated, you're still just going to be in that same situation.